All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Gusto webinar. Very excited for you all to be here. I'm very excited for our guest today. We have the amazing Nadia, Senior Director HRBP over at Deel, and we're all going to be talking about high performance culture today. So super stoked for that. Before we jump into things, I'd love for everyone just to kind of post in the chat, whether you're LinkedIn or whether you're joining us on YouTube, just let us know where you're coming from, what the weather's like, and if you have a burning question, you want to get it out right away, get it in there, because then we'll make sure that we answer it. I'm over in Toronto today. If you've joined these before, I'm usually in Victoria, but today I'm joining from lovely Toronto. Nadia, where are you coming in from?
I'm in San Jose, California, so just in the Bay Area, about 30-40 minutes south of San Francisco.
Nice. All right. Well, let's jump into things. You all know who I am. My name is Noah Warder. I'm the head of people over here at Gusto. I'm all things people, all things culture, and all things recognition. But I'm going to pass it over to Nadia to do a little introduction about where she's coming from, her history, and kind of why she got into the people space in the first place. So Nadia, take it away.
Thank you for having me today. I'm Nadia Alaee. I lead our global HR business partner group here at Deel. I've spent a lot of time working at fast-paced startups. I started my career actually in museums. I was an art history poli-sci major and then transitioned into tech, worked at Google for a few years, and then wanted to have a little bit more impact, work in a more fast-paced growing work environment. So transitioned into the startup space. So I've worked at several startups since then. And I was actually a Deel client turned into a Deel team member. So have been on the back end where I was using Deel as a customer, and now I'm working internally at Deel in the people space.
That's quite a transition from art history over to technology.
It was.
That's awesome. Yeah. Before we jump into the topic, I would just love to what was that transition like? Because I think those cultures are very, very different. And how did you manage that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, I was young. I had just graduated school. I loved art. I wanted to work in the art space. I was extremely lucky to get a job at a museum. It's hard to get museum jobs. People basically have to retire or leave the institution for there to be new openings. Museums aren't fast-paced, fast-growing organizations, right? There's X amount of jobs and the people are sitting in those seats. So I was very lucky. And I had a great 2 or 3 years working at museums, but it just wasn't the growth opportunities, the career opportunities wasn't there for me. I think I was a little bit more ambitious and the work environment felt a little bit stagnant, a little bit bureaucratic, a little bit slow. So I was looking for more. And I think that's why transitioning into tech motivated me. And that was something that was kind of growing when I was at this time when I was transitioning. It was Silicon Valley was really popping up. So it was a perfect time. But yeah, the learning curve was a little bit steep. For example, I didn't have a laptop at my museum job. I had a desktop. And when I left the museum, I didn't work after 5 p.m. Right. So I was a little bit more on. I was a lot more fast paced, but I appreciated the learning opportunity and being able to have the opportunity to be even transition from a very different role into tech, into the tech people space was very rewarding. So it was a little bit of a learning curve, but I adapted pretty quickly. So it was fun.
Cool. Well, I think that and brings us into our topic really nicely of just high performance culture. Because I can imagine at a museum, there are probably very high standards in that, but it's not you're not driving towards a revenue goal. You're not, everything's grow or bust all the time. So what does high performance culture mean to you? And what does it mean to Deel as an organization?
Yeah, I think high performance culture to me is a place where team members and managers are invested in their own growth and development. And with that, they want to deliver the best services, the best products, the best outputs for our clients or whoever that may be. And I think that especially reigns true at Deel. One of our values is exceeding expectations. So we put a huge emphasis on living by this every day at all levels of the organization, right? We have high expectations for our team members on the IC level and the people manager level, because we want to be able to deliver the best products and services for our customers. We're very, very client focused. And this is kind of where our high performance culture really stems from, I think. We're very mission driven because we want to provide that access for everyone to work and live wherever they want. And if you can do that compliantly through Deel, that's what we want to do. So we want to be able to provide that service that's best in class. And all of our team members are very bought into that mission. I think we are very subtly and not in an overbearing way mission driven at the company. Everyone you talk to, all dealers, you can tell how passionate they are, right, about what Deel is doing. And I think that passion translates into high performance, because people have that mission-driven attitude. So they want to effectively be performing so that they can provide the best products and services to our clients. And you see that across all levels of the company.
Yeah, I think like it sounds like Deel's done a very great job of like defining the purpose of the organization. Like what are you trying to do?
Yes.
And when people have a really clear idea what the purpose is of the organization and how they can impact that purpose, you're right. They're very passionate about their job, and that leads to high performance, which is, I think, the goal of every organization, right? You want to have high performing teams, you want to have high performing individuals, but there's always the kind of the difficulty of how do you define or grade high performance? Like what tools or frameworks do you use or do you like to use at Deel to kind of like make sure that, there are the high performers and, sometimes there are low performers, and what do you do in those situations?
Yeah, totally. That's a good question. I think it's nice. And I think it's one of the things that I highlight that I like so much about working at Deel is that really subtle mission-driven culture that lends itself to high performance. I think those things go really nicely and hand in hand. So that emphasis on performance culture makes sense to all of our team members. It's not something that people managers are doing to employees or something that team members are stressed out by, right? Everyone's pretty invested in being a high performer and exceeding those expectations when we can. But of course, we put several kind of formal levers into place, both at the company level and at the team level, so we can review the performance on an ongoing basis. The first thing, and many companies do this, is performance reviews. We do them 2 times a year, middle of the year and the end of the year. We look at critically performance of all team members who have been at the company 6 months or more. We have each team member reflect on their performance, right? Because we want to understand, how do I think I'm doing based on my roles and responsibilities, the metrics that I've been given, what I think my role should be as a high performer. We gather feedback from colleagues and stakeholders, and those are chosen by team members, they're chosen by the person's manager to make sure we have a really good holistic view of that team member's performance. So when the manager sits down and looks at the team member self-reflection, they look at all the feedback that's given. We use a tool called Culture Amp, which is also gathering feedback from things like kudos and shout outs and feedback that's given throughout the year. So we kind of try to get rid of that recency bias as much as we can, right? So managers can have a very holistic review when they're looking at each person's performance. As a part of these cycles, we also calibrate. It's really important to us that managers across all levels, across all teams, managing all different kinds of roles, are scoring in a really fair and equitable way, right? We use a 5-point scale, but we want to make sure that every manager is thinking of a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5 in the same kind of way, despite roles being different and responsibilities being different. For example, someone who is meeting expectations as a customer success manager, we want to make sure that the person who's meeting expectations on the customer support team, they're leveled and they're being viewed in the same way as the manager scoring it. And as a part of this, we also get leadership involved, right? Our top executives are involved in the calibration process. They have a view of people's performance. They're able to influence ratings and give their feedback to see if there's any changes we want to make across any of the ratings that were given. We don't force a curve, right? But we look at the breakdown, right? We want to see that we have a healthy mix of ratings, and we don't have some managers that are rating everyone as top performers, or maybe they're not top performers compared to other people. So it's important for us to calibrate and make sure we kind of get rid of that, a little bit of that bias, and make sure it's fair across the board. And then based on that, we always cap off our performance review cycles with promotions and any other compensation programs that we may be looking at, to making sure we're rewarding our top talent. And then alongside that, we make sure we review our low performers. What are we doing to action on these low performers, right? We want to make sure that low performers are giving opportunities to improve. We as a team and as a management team are putting in the levers for them to be able to improve, whether that's a coaching plan, a performance improvement plan. Maybe it's a separation from the company. Maybe they're a better fit for a different role, right? How can we critically look at these lower performers and be able to address each of their performance concerns in a really thoughtful way that makes sense for them and makes sense for the business? So we look at performance from the top performers and low performers and make sure we're addressing them across all of our performance cycles. But then with that, I think it's important to in sustaining high performance culture is looking at performance on an ongoing basis, right? It can't just start and stop with performance cycles and then managers are off the hook. We don't think about it for 6 months. So we put in certain levers and cadences where people managers are looking at performance either monthly or quarterly. Our HR business partner team works really closely with managers to kind of build in the right metrics, the right levers. We have tons of dashboards to look at performance. We look at performance alongside engagement and other data metrics that we have because we want to make sure that it doesn't end, right? That we're always thinking about it. And then when the next performance cycle comes up, we're not just addressing performance in an isolated cycle. We've thought about it for the previous 6 months, and then the performance cycle comes up and we can thoughtfully address it. Some teams have things like performance improvement plans, right? That if you aren't hitting certain metrics, you automatically qualify for a PIP. And we put that person on the PIP because we think they can be successful and maybe they need a more formal kind of program to help them get there. So it will vary team by team. Of course, we have company programs in place, but we just want to make sure it's ongoing. Performance management is continual. It's important for us to sustain that performance culture, but we can't do it if we're just looking at it cycle to cycle. It has to be happening all the time.
Yeah, I think the days of the annual performance review are gone, and the days of where it's just the manager talking down at somebody are gone. And it's really exciting to see that happen. And I think companies like Deel, it sounds like you have a very robust system in place to reduce those biases, build in those checks and balances. It's not all on the manager, because we all know that manager performance can also vary across teams. And so I was talking to one HR executive, and they're like, how do you have high performers, but they're being blocked by their low performing manager? How do you address this situation? And it was a very interesting conversation to have of just like, what do you do in this situation when you have high performing individual contributors and a low performing manager? Do you have any thoughts on that? Just like kind of off the cuff.
No, it's a really good question. And I think sometimes we think about performance management only on the individual contributor level. And we think about people managers as the people who are owning performance, but then what about the performance of the people manager who's owning the performance of the individual contributors, right? It's a loop. I think for us, we look at performance across all levels of the organization. There's no bias against individual contributors or people managers. Leadership is constantly looking at the performance of their people management team because they're only as strong as their people management team, right? If I have a group of managers, and I'm always looking at how they're doing, right? Because how they're doing is going to reflect how their team is doing, how they're influencing their team, how they're managing their team, coaching, training. That's important to me, and it's important to all of our leaders too. So I think our executive team is very bought into performance management. And with that, people managers are also set to a high standard, right? They're owners of performance management, but they're also being performance managed. So we look critically on that all the time, and we make changes as needed. For example, if someone is not delivering or performing as a people manager, can we help them to effectively manage? Is there certain coaching that we need to be putting into place? Are they maybe not a fit for a manager role? Maybe we promoted them too soon, or we brought them from outside the organization into a manager role. Maybe they aren't a right fit. Maybe they're better suited for an individual contributor role. We've had several cases where we found the manager wasn't an effective manager. They weren't the kind of manager we needed for this role. We've had difficult conversations with them, but also put them into individual contributor roles where they're being largely successful, right? Which is better for them. It's better for the business. So I think it's important to not just focus on the team member and the IC level. As you said, I think the managers are the one managing that performance. And if they're not doing that effectively, then we need to be able to address from the top and take kind of steps to evaluate all of our people managers. And we put our people managers up to a very high standard, maybe even higher standard than our individual contributors, because they're the ones directly impacting how their teams are doing and the success of their team. So it's something we look at constantly, and especially from the executive level.
That's amazing. That's awesome to hear. And I think like we hear it all the time and you see articles about it, but like so often, like you said, people are promoted into management positions, and often they're not ready. They're not given the right resources. They're not trained properly. It's their first time being a manager. Being a manager is a skill. Like all the things that come with being a manager there's a lot of skills that you don't get to hone as an individual contributor.
Yeah. And at Deel, especially difficult at Deel because we're so global and we have so many different employment types. So it's not just like you're managing the US full-time team member, you're managing across all different employment types and countries, which you have to think about things differently, right? You have to think about the approaches and the strategies and the recommendations a little bit differently. So it's a big job at Deel, right? And the success of a manager so much influences the team members' happiness at the company, right? So making sure we have the right people in the seats, and it's not for everyone. And for us, we try to emphasize the only path to promotion is not people management. Because I think there is a little bit of a misconception. Well, I have to be a manager to get a promotion or move up in my career. And at Deel, we want to make sure it's clear that you don't have to, right? We have paths for individual contributors that are leveled the same as a people manager. And that's a path you can go down if you're not someone who wants to manage, or you're not suited to management, or that's not something you want to go down for your career. So making sure we put an emphasis that advancement in your career is not tied to people management only.
I think that's so important to call out. And I think so many companies fall into that trap of like, it's like IC 1 to 4. And then at that point you move into management. And it's just like, that is the worst thing you can do because people are like, I guess I got to become a manager.
Totally. Yes. Yeah. And management is a full-time job. I think that gets lost.
Very difficult.
Like, when you become a people manager, most of your job is managing that team. Well, at companies like ours, where we're very fast-paced, we have a lot going on, we're not as hierarchical. Managers are doing all levels of work, right? So they're helping on all levels. But I think that it gets lost a little bit, that your top line should be managing this team to be successful. And if that's not something that you're invested in, then it's not going to work, right? Your teams won't be successful because you don't know what you're doing. So making sure managers will have the right people in the seats is so crucial.
Yeah. In every company I've ever been in where we've promoted someone from IC to manager, I've sat down with them and been like, okay, your role now is to not do any of the things that you were just doing. It is to manage your team.
Yeah.
And that's a major mind shift that a lot of them struggle with, and it takes some time to assimilate.
Yeah.
Yes. Love it. Okay, so we've talked about high performance culture, and we've talked a little bit about the role managers play in this, and which is like they're responsible for creating happiness on their teams, making sure that they're performing to a high level. But what about the executives? Like what's their role in creating a high performance culture? Because they're generally the ones holding everybody else accountable. Who's holding the executive team accountable? What's their role in this? How are they creating that high performance culture at their level and making sure it cascades at all levels?
Yeah, I think one thing that's special about Deel is that all of our executives are very bought into high performance culture. That's something that has been developed from the top and brought down. I think they have very high expectations of themselves, and then thus they have very high expectations of their people managers, of their individual contributors, of all of their teams. So that's something that we have had from the beginning of the organization. And I think what is nice about our executive team, and I think can be a skill set across all executive teams, is not being afraid to kind of get in the nitty gritty and get scrappy and be involved at all levels of what the team is working on. I think that's what our team does very well. Our COO, our CEO, our CTO are all very involved in all levels of what teams are working on. So they have really good visibility into what are the challenges, where are our teams struggling, where can we influence, where can the executives step in and help, what are the performance metrics that they think are really important. So I think having that really strong grasp of what all of their business groups are delivering on and what their challenges are and where they can really influence, no matter what level, right? They're from the top to the bottom, they're always involved. And I think that helps them be involved in that performance culture because they have a really, really good grasp on what's happening, right? At all levels and what things that we need to focus on to make sure this team is performing at the highest level. So I think being involved, right, and being communicative and not being so top down where they don't know what's going on all over the place, and having really good people managers and leadership in place that's managing up to them, right? And giving them the information they need, highlighting the challenges. Here's what's going well. Here's where I need your help to help any blockers or challenges that I have. So our exec team is very involved in the nitty gritty and they're very scrappy. And I think that's something that's really special about Deel. And I've seen it at other organizations too, but I think that aids in a successful performance culture from the top because our executives have a really good understanding of what's going on, right? If you're so disengaged, you won't be able to influence performance as much because you don't have a really clear understanding. But ours are very engaged. They're very involved and not in a way that's overbearing or micromanaging, but in a way where like, how can I help? Right? Like, how can I roll my sleeves up and fix this problem or unblock something that's happening or address a performance concern or get on a call with a team member and help them through something. So I think that level of involvement and engagement has attributed to that high performance culture being sustained from the top.
I love that. And I think like you're touching on the, like, it really needs to be embodied by the leadership because no one else will buy into it if the leadership's not bought into it. It doesn't matter the processes, the policies, it doesn't matter how good your performance management program is.
Yeah.
The executives don't care about it. No one cares about it.
Yeah. And they're so involved, right? They're so engaged with performance management. They love our calibration process. They want to get in there. They want to see everyone's ratings. They want to give their opinions. They want to influence any changes. They want to be part of that discussion. Similarly, we just launched an engagement survey and they're so engaged on the topics, right? And finding the connections between engagement and performance and making ties there. What are our low performers saying? What are our high performers saying? What are the issues that we're saying? How can I influence any sort of engagement there? So they're highly engaged with our team members and that kind of employee experience, which is really nice to see. And I think that's what kind of helps us sustain it, right? Because they see the importance of it. And it comes down again to like delivering the best products and services for our clients. And that's coming from the top, right? So we want the right people in the right seats performing at the right level to be able to give our clients exactly what they need.
I think that's so amazing to hear, because I think that's something special that Deel has, is having that involvement from the executive team. I think it's really important. It doesn't sound like it's overbearing or that they're, stepping into places that they're not stepping into or shouldn't be stepping into.
Totally.
Can you give me like a couple of like really practical examples of, because I'm sure there's, people listening in right now on the HR side of things that are like, how do I get my executives to do this? Like, how do I bring them along for the ride and get them involved? And so like, what are some things that you've done? Maybe there's some executives that you've kind of had to coach a little bit more, or like you show them what other teams are doing. Like how just like one or two practical examples of how to like boost that executive involvement without it becoming overbearing.
Yeah, I think one really good one is making connections to business outcomes, is making sure that executives understand how the performance of your team is going to directly impact business outcomes, which are directly tied to your own performance, right? I think one thing that we don't do as much when we think about performance management is think about OKRs, KPIs. If this person isn't performing on this level, what are the downstream effects on this business goal that we had? And making that connection and making really clear to executives. We recently did a few trainings with our leadership team to make sure that they continue to be bought in performance management. And one of the things we really highlighted is that business impact, right? As an executive, as a leader, you have certain business goals, impacts, things that you are responsible directly for the success of. And those things are directly impacted by the success of your team. So if you're not bought into the performance of your team and you're kind of letting low performers coast, or you're not directly influencing and looking at performance on an ongoing, consistent basis, those are going to have negative impacts on your business goals, right? Which you're going to be judged at when the performance review cycle comes. So really making sure they understand that connection. I think that gets lost a little bit when we think about performance management, but it's so important, right? We want people to be exceeding expectations so we can deliver as a business. And then that's success for everyone, right? It's success internally, it's success for all of our clients, it's success for the organization. So making sure executives and leadership understand that connection and where they play a pivotal role in that. I think another way is, I think executives like to be more motivating them to be involved in what's going on along their teams has helped us a little bit. I think for us, our executive team they're very engaged, and they are engaged because their management team is really good at communicating. They're given all the information. They know what's going on each level because there's open lines of communication, and they feel involved in influencing on decisions and making impacts on certain performance related decisions that we make, retaining team members, where we show them data. So it comes down to how can we make sure that our executive team, number one, understands our business outcomes. Number two, looks at the data, right? If you see we have X amount of low performers leaving every month, or we have high performers leaving every month, here are the reasons. Showing them that data so they see numbers behind it has really helped to influence our exec team, right? Because you don't think about it when it's happening in the moment. We have almost 3,000 team members, right? We have people leaving, we have people coming, but to look critically at that data of, are there certain team members that are unhappy with certain managers? Or are there certain team members that are consistently low performers on certain roles? Like, are we not managing those roles correctly? Going with that to them with the data. And we do this really closely on the HR business partner team and with the talent acquisition team to making sure we're delivering that organizational health data so they understand. They like to see the numbers, right? If the numbers are telling a story, and if we can tell a story using the data, it's not just anecdotal feedback that we're hearing there. That's really helped us too. So I think data and then tying to business impacts is really important for executives.
I love that you brought up data, because I think it is one of the most critical things that people teams can do to kind of like elevate our department, because like we've had a history of being soft and fuzzy and party planners and all that other garbage.
Yes.
And I think in the last 10 years, people data has really helped elevate our role in our departments. And I love that Deel is doing this, and it sounds like you have a really robust kind of people analytics program and you're tracking everything. And I like that you use the term organizational health. It's not, it's not like the people team owning this data. It's like, no, this is organizational. This is across everybody. It's amazing to hear. Yes.
Yeah, we have a huge emphasis on data and data integrity. We're constantly looking at how can we, yes, we hear feedback from one-on-one conversations, anecdotal feedback, comments and engagement survey, exit interview feedback, lots of anecdotal feedback. But if we can couple that feedback with actual data to tell a story, it's just way more powerful, right? It's more powerful to influence a decision, influence a iteration on any sort of program, make a policy change that we need to, address a performance concern. That's where we find the real bread and butter, right? We want to be able to have both sides and together tell one story that makes sense. And there's supporting facts on both kinds of data points.
Yeah, you need the both of them. Like you can't lean too far on one or the other. You need to tell that story with numbers and the qualitative feedback. Love it. It's great. Let's kind of jump in. You talked a little bit about how you are training your executives around performance management, and you're making sure that they kind of have the clues and the ideas of like, this is your impact on the outcomes. And if you're allowing these things, that's how it is. What do you do for the managers? Like, you've got all these frontline managers, I'm sure, 3,000 people organization. You've got managers that are coming into the position that are brand new. You've also probably got managers who've been there for a few years. How are you making sure that they're all kind of level set at the same level?
Yeah. So we have, I think I don't know, don't quote me on this number, but I think we have about 400 people managers at Deel. All 400 of those people managers, like you said, are at different parts of their management journey, right? They're either promoted a month ago. They entered the organization with 20 years of management experience. They've only been a people manager at Deel and they've had 2 years of experience managing. So they're all over the place, right? So we want to make sure that with that, we can level the playing field as much as we can and give them all the same kind of resources so they understand what we expect of people managers at Deel specifically. And hopefully they can take these resources and learnings to the next company they go to. But what we do for performance management specifically is during our performance management cycles, we launch several trainings that are mandatory for people managers and individual contributors. And there's two, right? There's one for people who are going through performance management to understand, how do I give myself feedback? How do I give my peer feedback? How do I approach maybe a difficult feedback conversation with my manager? And then separately, we have people managers go through a people manager specific training, which trains them on how to rate people, how should you be looking at performance? How should you have calibration conversations with other managers on your team? How do you have difficult feedback conversations if the person isn't performing? How do you work with your HR business partner to address low performers? What are ways we can motivate and engage top performers? So we have two separate trainings that we make everyone go through as a part of our biannual training. So everyone's kind of going through that 2 times a year. And then our HR business partner team works really, really closely with managers to coach them and mentor them on how to review performance, how to address performance concerns, what are the levers we have in place for you, how to look at it on an ongoing basis, how to look at data, how to motivate your top performers, how to have those hard feedback conversations on an ongoing basis if you need to. And I think we try to emphasize the importance of performance management during our performance cycles and then also carry it through for the next 6 months until the next cycle. We, as a company, are also investing in Q4 in our people development team. So we're hoping to launch a series of manager trainings and leadership academies where we could put all of our people managers through comprehensive manager trainings. This is something that we haven't been able to focus on to date. We've had several people team foundational things that we've had to prioritize, but we're really excited for by the end of the year to have really comprehensive manager training so we can put everyone through it. And then once we've done that, kind of cipher the levels, right? If we have mid-level managers, more senior managers, how can we give them specific training and resources for their level and meet them kind of where they're at? So we're excited about this investment. It's coming a little bit soon, but we've put a good emphasis on making sure managers are trained in terms of performance as much as we can.
Cool. That's amazing to hear. And I assume, like, are these trainings mandatory? Do you make have managers, is it like this is the day and you show up, or do you kind of give them a little bit of leeway of like, you got to do this by X date, just make sure it's done?
Yes, we definitely give people leeway. At Deel, we're moving so fast. Our number one priority is work, right? Making sure your business outcomes are being met, while also being a little bit flexible on these trainings. They are mandatory. So we do put an emphasis on making sure everyone's going through the training, because we want everyone to have the same experience, right? If one people manager has taken the training, but another one hasn't, that experience is going to trickle down to those team members, right? And we don't want team members to have differing experiences with their people managers in terms of how those people managers are trained and educated on all of our programs and how to address things like performance. So it's mandatory, but we're very flexible, right? We're like, hey, completed by this date. We give plenty of leeway. We meet people where they're at. We're not forcing people, you have to do it on this date at that time. And we're so global that things like that wouldn't even work. So we try to be as flexible as we can. We give people deadlines, soft deadlines. We extend it. We follow up. So we try to meet managers and all of our team members where they're at. We'll also, from them, having an expectation of investment into making sure they're looking at these resources.
That's awesome. That's amazing. And I guess kind of it brings me up to another question of like, high performance on the people team, because people team can have like even more of an impact than managers even. And, we're the ones that are coaching the managers. We're the ones that are coaching the executives. We're the ones that are coaching the individual contributors when they come to us and they're like, my manager is not doing things for me. How do I address this issue? So what are you doing to make sure that there's high performance on the people team? Like, do you have training programs, or is it more, coaching and mentoring? What does that look like?
That's a really good question. I think it differs based on team. So we have several people teams within our people organization. For example, our talent acquisition is our largest team on our people team. They have so many trainings and resources because we want to make sure talent acquisition understands all of our programs, our policies. They're talking to candidates in the right way. They're sharing the right information. And like I said, so many employment types, so many countries. So those conversations are going to be really nuanced based on who that candidate is. So we want to make sure they're not sharing the wrong information, because if they do, that wrong information is going to come back to my team, for example. And we're like, ooh, sorry, you were misinformed. Like, that's not actually something we can do. So TA has lots of training, so which is nice. I think all other teams were kind of on a coaching mentorship. And what's really nice, and I can speak most specifically to my team, is that we're very open and communicative with each other, right? We can commiserate at a certain level, but we're also so solution oriented. And I think what's really nice is that everyone brings challenges that they're having to the table to get everyone else's advice, right? To me, my perspective is we're as strong as we are as a team. You can perform great as an individual, but we need to also be performing well as a team. And if we can all support each other to do that, let's do it. We're all going to make mistakes. If we can learn from those mistakes, great, let's do it. So having that open communicative culture of like, it's okay to make a mistake. Let's not make that mistake again. And let's share the mistake out so we can all learn from it. So other HRBPs, for example, are not making that mistake. So a lot of coaching, a lot of mentoring, a lot of open conversations, and reviewing things really thoughtfully and not moving too fast, right? I think it's important when sustaining high performance culture on people team, our room for error sometimes can be a lot larger, right? Our mistakes can be compliant related. We can get sued for them. They can be really costly, right? So we have to be really thoughtful in everything we're doing, slow down, ask all the questions you have, right? No question is a bad question. So thinking about how our performance can have negative downstream effects on the business, right? Largely our role as a people team is to service our clients, who are our team members, and then make sure the business is protected. So really sharing out challenges that we're seeing and solving things together. We're very supportive group across all people functions, which is really nice. Everyone's willing to step up, help someone when they need, give someone advice. And I think that kind of team-driven mentality has benefited us largely. So we can learn and grow from each other.
That's awesome. It almost like sounds like you've like, I'm sure you're a part of some, but there's those HR communities out in the wild that we're all a part of, where you can kind of go and commiserate and ask for help and all those things. It sounds like you have that internally at Deel, just because there's enough of you to do that. And
yes. And I think
that's a special something.
Yes, it's special because we can commiserate up to a certain level, but we always solve the problem, right? It's always like, okay, we have these challenges. You have it too. We have it too. Okay, great. Commiserate. What's the solution, and how can we move forward? What stakeholders do we need to talk to solve this? So I think that really like proactive solution oriented attitude has helped us sustain that performance culture, right? Because we're always trying to solve something or fix something or build something or iterate on something or make sure if this happened one time, how can we do it differently next time? So that's really kind of aided that consistent performance-based mentality.
Yeah, and it's the like you said, that solution oriented mentality. Don't come just with the problem. Come with the problem and a possible solution. Or if you're asking for solutions, be open to all solutions.
Exactly. And sometimes you come up with solutions or you come up with ideas and we don't do it, right? We don't use that solution. We don't use that idea, but still come with the idea. Maybe we'll use it, maybe we won't, but you've thought about it critically. You've presented one option. We've talked about it. We've discussed it. And I think that's something we really try to do on the team, is like make sure everyone's voices are heard and people are comfortable sharing their ideas and speaking up. And with the caveat that, hey, we're not going to take every idea. We're not going to do every single program or policy change, X, Y, and Z, but voice it, right? We want to hear what you have to say. We want all, again, like I think I mentioned this earlier, my team and the people team, we're not so hierarchical, right? Everyone can contribute on all kinds of things. All stakeholders, we want to be involved. The more opinions and perspectives we're getting, the better, right? Let's solve these problems together.
Yeah, we don't know our own blind spots. And I think I had a COO, like this was the thing he really implemented with his engineers when he was a founder. And it was like, as soon as you put that idea out there, it's no longer yours. It's the team's idea. Like exactly. You cannot hold to your idea. Once it has left your lips, it's not yours anymore. And I think that was a really interesting shift to see on his engineering team, where he presented that and was like, I'm seeing this problem. And so he said that, and it like you could see it within like a week. Like there was just this mentality shift of people just started feeling a lot more comfortable throwing out ideas. It didn't matter if it was crazy. They didn't have to hold on to it and defend it anymore. It was
and I'm always like, if you have a question, there's no bad question, right? Like don't feel self-conscious about asking a question because you feel like, oh, I should know the answer to this. It's better for me always for you to ask the question, share the idea, rather than make the mistake because you haven't spoken up, right? Be comfortable speaking up. No idea is a bad idea. No question is a bad question. We'll solve it together. You're going to help other people learn and grow, and then we'll prevent mistakes downstream.
Yeah, and somebody else probably has the same question.
Totally. Thinking it, but they won't say it.
There's always one other person who's having the same question as well.
They're like, oh, I'm so glad Noah asked. Okay, good.
When I used to teach, I used to say that in my class all the time. Ask the question, because I can guarantee you 2 other students in this class are thinking the same thing.
100%.
Yep. So let's I want to shift things a little bit and talk about communication, because you're fully remote, you're all over the world. I can't imagine how much you have to invest in making sure people are communicating clearly and properly, and asynchronous versus synchronous. But let's dive into like the specificity of like, how do you communicate to the low performers of an organization? Like, how do you broach that conversation? How do you kind of discuss the difference between a high performer and a low or moderate performer to the employees themselves?
Yeah. So this is a good question, and something we really try to emphasize with our people managers, that when performance review cycles come around and I get a certain score, I, as the team member, should not be surprised by my score, right? Because the expectation is that in that last 6 months before the cycle happened, the manager and the team member are having consistent feedback conversations. You kind of know where you stand as you're entering a performance management cycle. It should never be a surprise. If it is a surprise, the people manager is not doing their job. So that's something we really think about. And always there's going to be cases where a team member comes to us and was like, I'm really surprised I got this score. I've never been given feedback. Here's examples of times when the manager said I was doing great. Everything they're saying now I never heard before. So we try to really prevent those situations as much as we can, right? Because we put that onus on the people manager to own ongoing performance and make sure we're not just focusing on the tactical and the day-to-day. You're focusing also on how to grow and develop your teams and identifying the top performers, low performers. So when performance management cycles come around, everyone knows where they stand. So in terms of how to address kind of low performers, high performers, I think oftentimes it will depend based on the role, right, and their responsibilities. For example, some teams have certain attainment metrics they need to hit. Some teams have more soft skills they need to be hitting. So we put really high emphasis on making sure that each team member and each manager are having conversations about, hey, you're in this role right now. Here are the expectations for your role. I've clearly outlined them. Here's how every month, every quarter you're doing against those roles and responsibilities. If you are in a path to promotion because you're a top performer, here are the expectations for you and the things that you need to be working on to be ready for that next promotion in 3 months and 6 months, whenever that is. So making sure that team members know where they stand, right? They know the expectations of their role today, what it's going to take to be a top performer in that role. And then if they're not performing, we're clearly having those conversations, right? We're giving that feedback back. We're addressing it consistently. We want again, to go back to this idea of like not being surprised, people have to know where they stand, right? They have to know, if I'm not performing, okay, what do I need to do as a team member? How is my manager going to coach and train me and help me level up? How are we both investing in my own growth and development? And if I'm a top performer, I know where I stand and I know I'm hitting these things to get to that promotion. I'm having these open, honest conversations. So I think a lot about that is communication, right? People have to know how their performance is measured. It shouldn't be a surprise. They should be clearly bought into how their performance is measured because they're the ones being tied to that, right? I think lack of this kind of transparency, that's when we have a problem. That's when team members are like, I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. And now I got this bad score. And now I'm worried I'm going to be fired, right? That should never be the case because we have defined roles and responsibilities and making sure team members understand what those are and what it's going to take for them to perform at a certain level. So make those open lines of communication between team member and manager are critical.
I love that. And it's like you said, it's providing the framework for the employee to like understand, how do I get from point A to point B? I'm curious, is just like, does that also include like lateral moves in the organization? Like if you have like a team member who's say on the QA team or support team and they want to move into a more technical role or a less technical role, like are you having those similar conversations and using similar frameworks for those conversations as well?
Yeah, very much so. So we, as much as we can promote from within and move people internally into different roles and fill open headcount from within, we want to do that, right? Because we really want to invest in our current team members as much as we can. And we want to be able to give opportunity for team members, say you're an HRBP, but you want to learn more about product management. How can we give that HRBP a path to learning more and maybe someday going into that role? If we can do that internally within Deel, we love it. Let's do it. So I think we have to make sure we're also looking critically, right? We have certain eligibility requirements. If you're internally transferring, you have to have got an X score on your last few performance cycles. You have to be in good standing. The manager has to support it. You have to have certain skill sets. And that also comes between a conversation between the person hiring for that role, right? If maybe I'm applying for a role and I have 80% of the minimum requirements and the manager's like, you know what, based on my conversations and the interviews, Nadia I think they can be successful. I'm willing to take a chance on that 20% that maybe they don't 100% have totally baked out, but I think they can get there. So it depends on the situation and that kind of investment that the hiring manager and the support from the current manager for that team member to move around. But internal mobility is something we put a strong emphasis on and we really, really strongly encourage.
That's great to hear, because I know in a lot of organizations, managers don't like promoting those internal opportunities because they don't want to lose their highest performers on their team. How do you address that?
Yeah, we've seen that too. Of course, there's cases where I'm like, oh no, I don't want to support this because I, like you said, don't want to lose this person. They're doing great. Like this is going to be a big gap for my team. So I think a lot of it is making sure managers understand, number one, yes, it might be a gap, but as an organization, we're willing to support you to fill that gap, right? You can backfill that person if the business case makes sense, and we'll have an appropriate transition time where it's not like today I interview for this role, tomorrow I'm gone, and then you have a big gap on your team, right? Making sure the current manager and the hiring manager are being thoughtful about that transition period and making sure both teams are set up for success as that person moves. But I think it's important to bring managers into why this is important, right? As you're growing and sustaining these high performing teams, you have to be open to giving people opportunities to do different things. Otherwise, they're going to feel stagnant. They're going to feel stuck. That's going to demotivate them, right? So, and other team members are going to see that, right? So there's downstream effects of these kind of decisions. And we've found that most of our managers have been bought in if they feel supported through that transition period. I think managers sometimes they're scared, right? Like there's someone, what am I going to do? Everyone's already so busy. How am I going to take on this extra work? So I think it's just providing that support, providing that stability through that transition time and making sure they're bought into why this is important, why this kind of investment is going to be good for this person. It's going to be good for your team because they're going to see that you support this person's career and development. It's going to make you a stronger people manager, right? Because other team members are going to learn from this. Just bringing them along as a part of that journey. And I think assuring them that you don't have to be scared. We're here to support you. We will figure this out from all that sides.
Yeah, there's a lot of intangibles there that it's like, it's not just about losing the person. Like we have to support these high performers, or they're going to like, ultimately they'll just leave the organization.
Totally, it's demotivating. Yeah. So you have to make sure as a people manager, we have to make really tough decisions, right? Sometimes it's not what we want, but it's for the betterment of the larger team and betterment for that person. And I think that's something that you have to really do as a people manager. You have to be able to kind of let go of your own ego and your own pride and your own fears and really make decisions that are going to best impact the team. I think that's such a huge part of being a people manager.
Yeah, it's the whole leaders eat last mentality of like, yeah, you have to have the long-term picture in play all at all times of like
Yeah.
what
And
is best
something,
for the
yeah.
organization and the person.
Right. And sometimes you don't want to do it. It doesn't feel good. And it's like, it's stressful. It's too much, but it's part of it. It's part of the gig. That's why I'm like, it's not for everyone.
It's not for everyone. Very well said. I love it. Awesome. So you talked a little bit about this, but like, what are those metrics that you use to track high performance? And then,
Yeah.
How do you specifically translate this and communicate it to the executive team around engagement and retention? Because I think that's the hard part that a lot of HR people have is like, how do I paint this picture of these metrics that equal this over here? Which is what people care about.
Yeah, totally. So I think a few things. It's going to depend on every team and every role, right? Customer support specialists have different metrics than customer success managers compared to account executives compared to HRBP. So making sure we're really looking at those role specific metrics on an ongoing basis. And like I said, there's several teams that have kind of auto pips in place for people who don't hit certain metrics. So it's very clear across the company. So focusing on the team level, because I think that's definitely important. Everyone's roles vary and their performance is going to be judged slightly differently based on their responsibilities. We also look at other metrics, including performance management scores and tying them to engagement. So we're able to do that really nicely with our tool. We use Culture Amp. We just launched an engagement survey in July, and now we've been looking through the results over the last 2 months. And before the engagement survey, we had a performance management cycle. So we're able to pull the scores from that performance management cycle directly into our engagement survey results and see, okay, the people that scored meets expectations, how engaged are they? Where are the places where they're not as happy? Where are the places they're happy? How are our 4s and 5s responding to certain questions? How are our 1s and 2s responding? So we have a really beautiful view of how our top and low performers are responding and how engaged they are with an organization. And we can show that out to leadership and impact and influence decisions and dive deeper, right? We want to look at the manager level, the role level, the location level, the tenure level. So we're really looking at that data thoughtfully and any sort of actions and focus areas we have. We're looking at a holistic view of performance management compared to engagement. And that's been something that's been really nice. Like I said, that data, showing that data to executives has been really powerful for us to kind of influence changes we're making at the company level and at the team level and things we really want to focus on. And then also highlighting what's going really well, right? I think we've always put we think about engagement surveys, are always like, okay, here's all the things we need to do better. Here's the things people are but hey, how about the things we're doing really well on? Like we saw that like I said, this idea of mission driven, people are so bought into being proud to work at Deel. They love Deel. And let's celebrate that too, alongside the things that we need to do better. So being able to provide executives with both those kind of things, like here's the positives too, like let's focus on this and celebrate this and highlight this. But hey, here's a few challenges and here's areas that we can work on. And here's ideas for action plans to do that. So looking at survey data points across performance has been really interesting for us too. And I think as we're looking at each person's performance, we also want to practice that empathetic side, right? Everyone, especially in this very global async, we're in over 100 countries around the world. You could potentially be in a country or a city where there's no other person, right? So we want to be really empathetic to everyone's personal situations and understand any challenges they're having that might be affecting their performance, right? And being sure we as a people team, we're equipping our managers to have really thoughtful conversations with people and address performance both from the metric side and the people side, right? Because there could be things going on that we don't know that might be negatively affecting someone's performance, and being able to address that might help, right? Them improve, or how can we support them in any way that we need that we didn't know about before. So I think it's really important in this really global async environment to have that empathy, right? And like understand what people are going through if they're going through something, and if that potentially be affecting their performance, looking at that too. So several different metrics we want to look at because we want to be super holistic about performance. It's not, yes, we can just look at it hits that number, but what else is going on, right? How engaged are they? Things like how engaged are they also with our tools, right? For us, async remote environment, Slack is our office. Like that's kind of where we live and breathe. We're doing all of our work there. There's a lot of threads, there's a lot of messages. How engaged are people with our tools, right? Yeah. Salesforce, team-specific tools, our data analytics tools. How are we using these tools? kind of influences how you're performing, right? If I have an HRBP who's not using any of our organizational health dashboards in conversations with their leaders, to me, that's a problem, right? Because they're not using any data. They're not having those proactive, strategic conversations. So really looking holistically across all the data points that contribute to someone's performance, I think is really important, and not just being like, okay, they didn't hit this number this month. Okay, that's one data point. Let's look at a few others to make sure we're telling the right story here.
Yeah, I think I love that you called that. I was like, everyone kind of has their own personal circumstances. And sometimes, like, I've seen this in organizations where you have like a high performer, they've been a high performer for years.
Yeah.
And then like one quarter, everything just goes to hell. And
Yes.
you're just like, what happened? And you
Yes.
sometimes no one knows, but you just have to have that conversation with the person.
Yeah, we
and
have to
find out something tragic happened in their life and they're
Totally.
dealing with things. And it's like, oh, you just need some space.
Yeah, and we need to check in, and I think it's hard. Managers are stuck. We get really boggled down by the day-to-day, and to no one's fault, right? We're all trying to get a job done. We all have a lot of things on our plate. So sometimes that gets lost. So as much as we can remind our managers to be really thoughtful about that, check in with people, flag anything that doesn't feel right that's going on with your team so we can help support you in these conversations. How can we make sure everyone is good, right? Because we can't see you in person. We can't feel your energy if you're walking by me. We're only seeing you through a Google Hangout, or maybe you don't have your video on. So let's check in, right? Let's care about each other, and then corroborate that with any sort of performance concerns that we may have.
I love it. Yeah, I think it's that holistic view of these are people. We're not machines. We're all, we all come with our own baggage and experiences and all those things that define who we are at work. And I love that, Deel's taking that approach from a global perspective. It's like the experiences of your American employees are going to be very different than the experience of your German employees or Japanese employees.
Yeah. And I've never worked at a company that's this global, over 100 countries. So for me, it's a learning every day too, right? There's different situations happening in different countries, and how can we be really thoughtful about meeting people where they are, right? But also being like, hey, we have certain business goals we need to hit. Let's work together on being able to sustain that high performance culture, and how can we support you to get there?
I love it. I think it sounds like Deel is doing all the right things when it comes to performance and high performance, and making sure that you're not over indexing on one metric only, and that you're doing kind of the holistic view of things.
Yes. And we want team members to know that too, right? We're not just being like, oh, you did this one thing wrong. We're looking at the whole facet of things that may be going on so we can address it thoughtfully. Your specific case, everyone's performance concern is going to be slightly different, and there's going to be different metrics and different data points and different situational behavioral things we need to think about. So let's be really thoughtful about how we're addressing each situation.
Love it. That's great. I think those were we talked about some questions that we want to talk about. Those are all the questions, and talked about those things. I really invite everyone to, jump into the thread, jump into the comments, post your questions. We've got about 6 to 7 minutes left to answer some of those questions. But while we're kind of waiting on anyone kind of watching us currently asking those questions, I'd love to just hear a little bit more, Nadia, of just like, what are a couple of the things that you specifically like to do that you're at director level? You've got people that report up to you. What are some things that you like to do with your team specifically to help them feel like they're achieving their goals and doing the things that they want to be doing and having the career growth that they want to see?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, I operate on all levels, right? I will do the very strategic top line things, but I'm also willing to get in and do an audit of data and do that for 5 hours with you, right? I think I want to be involved where my team wants me to be involved and needs me, and no ask is too high or too low for me to be able to contribute. And I think that's been really helpful for my team to see that support system, right? Coming down from the top, where yes, I'm busy, I have things going on, but I'm always going to jump on a huddle with you to chat about something. I'm always going to, if you have a challenge that you're not sure how to address, I'm there, bring me into it. So I think I really highlight that kind of over communication, over transparency, ask questions, involve me when you need. Don't do something if you're not sure, right? Always come, and I'm going to support you from the top, because any mistake my team makes, I'm going to take responsibility. It's my mistake, right? So I want to help you as much as I can, so we together are not making any of those mistakes. And then owning those mistakes, I'm always going to own it, right? I'm a team person. We are one team. We're doing everything together. We're only as strong as we are as a team. So I try to make that as clear as I can. I think alongside that is anything that I learn from the company or things that I can share. As much as I can share, I try to over communicate back, right? I want my team to have all the information, understand if this policy is changing, how it's changing, how it's going to impact their day to day. If they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing and need to be doing a little bit differently, let me show you how you should be doing it differently this time, and let's talk about it. So I think over communication on all sides is important for me. And then, gosh, I think having a little bit of fun is important too. A nice team culture and vibe. We're able to joke with each other and commiserate and celebrate one another and be like, oh shoot, I made this mistake. Let's do it differently this time. Or, oh, that was me who did that. Sorry guys. Like, you know, so I think having that feeling of you can make a mistake, you can be open, we can laugh about it, we can do it differently next time. We can share out things about our personal lives, our travels, we support each other. I think that's been huge. And I think it's hard in a remote space to cultivate that. And I'm lucky to have a team that's very bought into our team, and they are very innately ambitious. And I'm trying to hire those people too, right? I have really, really high expectations for myself, and I have them also for my team. And I try to trickle that down in a kind of a not micromanaging, too serious, too imposing way. But I think I'm also looking for people who have that level of ambition and they want to deal. I say we learn every day is a new day. We say on the people team because we're learning 10 new things every single day. And I need people on my team who want to learn those things, right? They're also bought into it and we can learn it together. We make the mistakes together. We do it differently together. We build stuff together. So I think it's like that togetherness and all doing all the work, right? We have a lot of manual work at Deel. We have a lot of workflows and things that we still have a little bit of work to do to get it to more automated. We're operating at a little bit of more manual level that I would like. But with that, I think we're all able to contribute and impact and be involved in everything together. And I'm always like, if there's a project I'm working on that you want to work on, raise your hand, come in. Right? There's most things I can share with you. Most things I can have you look at the doc or have you look at the comm or look at this new policy we're thinking about. So I think bouncing ideas off each other and having that really strong team camaraderie is so important.
I love that. I think, and you talked about this a little bit with the executives, is like celebrating the wins, celebrating the fun. Like we can't all be doom and gloom or else we're all just going to feel bad about things. Like you got to celebrate those little things and build that community.
And if there is that doom and gloom, okay, let's laugh about it. This sucks. Let's do it better next time. We got this. It's okay.
Exactly.
No one's dying, right? Like we're good.
Yeah, I always like to say that, like we're not doctors, we're not curing the world, we're not surgeons. Like it's okay to make mistakes here. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Noah, can I ask you a question?
Of course, yes.
How do you think about high performance culture? How are you guys doing it? What are things that you have in place? How do you train your managers? How is it important from the top down?
Yeah, I think the way we think about it, similar to Deel, but a few differences. One thing that we really look about for high performance is recognition. Is how are people giving? I mean, we're a recognition company. It's kind of built into our blood. But how are people giving recognition, and how are people receiving recognition, and how do people feel recognized in the organization is something that we really, really double down on. Is like, are these, especially at the manager and leadership level, of like how often are you recognizing just people from your team, but people across the organization, because we don't work in isolation. You're like, I'm working with finance, I'm working with marketing, I'm working with our customer support and success teams. I should be giving out recognition to all of those teams and vice versa. And so looking at that data and building that picture there as well is very important to us and translates to us of like sort of similar to Deel of like a high recognition culture equals high engagement, because if people are recognizing their peers, recognizing their managers are recognizing their team members and other team members, it means that they're more engaged. You can draw that line very clearly, and high engaged teams are high performing teams. And so that's how one of the metrics that we use and we really double down on is recognition. How are we recognizing each other for our contributions, and not just for calling it in, but like, thank you, I saw you stepped out and did that thing for me that you didn't have to do. I really appreciate it. Or you took on that project that we kind of mused on in the background in that meeting. We're like, no, that's important. I think that we should just do that. I'm just going to take it on and run with it. Like looking at those things, I think is really important for us at Gusto and for myself. And I think the other part is like also tracking people's career growth, and are they happy with that growth, and do they feel like they can keep growing? That's really important for me.
Yeah, totally. I think it's so important to focus on that career growth in terms of like motivated, engaging team members, because they don't know what they don't know, right? If they don't have a path, they don't know what's happening, they're stagnant, they're top performers, but they don't know what's next. Like that's demotivating, right? And how can we retain that top talent by continuing to motivate them through development levers or promotion or whatever it may be that makes sense for them? And that's the way they want to be recognized, and that's the way they want to be grow, meeting people where they're at.
Exactly. Yeah. Building those personal plans for people as much as possible. We know
Yeah.
we're not a 3,000 employee company, so we might not have as much flexibility, but it's thinking creatively, like
Yeah.
creatively. Not everything has to be dollars. Not everything has to be a promotion or a title change. Those are
Yeah.
important, but
Yes.
how else can you contribute growth?
Yes, but and even like us, like we move people around the organization all the time because we're like, oh, we have a business need that Nadia might be a good fit for, and then Nadia's really excited about it. Like let's move her into this and see how it goes, right?
Yeah.
There's always opportunities of how we can iterate on things and create a new operational workflow that someone else needs to be a part of, and then you're in a new role, you're learning something new. So it's happening a lot naturally, but also making sure we have kind of the formal levers in place too.
I love it. I love it. Well, we're at time, and I want to be very conscious of your time. I know you're very busy, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. And I don't want to take any more of their time. So, Connor on our team has dropped our LinkedIn links in the chat. So if you want to connect with either myself or Nadia and ask some more questions about high performance culture, feel free to connect with either of us. Shoot us a message. But I just want to say thanks, Nadia. That was lovely. I learned a lot, and I hope everyone who joined us learned a lot. And good luck with your continued journey at Deel.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
So, okay. Thanks, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Bye.
Bye.